Hey guys, it's William. Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be going over the game from the Tata Steel Masters 2021 Round 8 between Pentala Harikrishna, Indian GM, and Alireza Firouzja. So, Harikrishna is white and Alireza is black. Pentala opens with d4, d5, c4, c6, the Slav defense, cx d5, cx d5, bishop f4, and knight c6. This is the exchange variation. e3, bishop f5. And in this position, there have been three positions played, which are knight c3, queen b3, and bishop d3. But Pentala goes for a new move, bishop e5. And now, as of move 6, this is a completely new game. So Alireza continues with e6, knight c3, knight e7, rook c1, and a6, kicking the bishop. Bishop back to e2, and f6, preparing e5. g4, attacking the bishop, bishop g6, and knight e3. Bishop f7, not allowing any h4 or knight h4 ideas. Bishop g3, sliding the bishop back. Now h5, at some point you want to play h4, and maybe bring the knight in to support h4. But g5, just pushing the pawn, and knight g6 now. Instead of knight g6, there was an interesting line, which was h4, bishop takes h4, and knight to f5. And this would win the bishop pair, say, if the bishop goes back, and takes, and with this doubled pawn, and you can even win it back. But this is very unclear. Instead of going for h4, Alireza went for knight g6 though. So gx f6 and h4. fx g7 in between move, and bishop x g7. Bishop e5, giving back the pawn that Alireza lost, and knight gx e5 and dx e5, knight x e5, and knight d4. Now this knight in the central square is very strong. Rook c8 developing, and now castles. This castles looks kind of weird because seemingly rook g8 would put the rook on the diagonal, but just king h1, and this bishop can't really get on this diagonal, so it's all fine. Knight c6, challenging the knight on d4, and bishop g4. Takes, and rook c6. Now this pawn may look very weak because it's a backwards e-pawn, but this rook and bishop, even the queen and king can defend it. So knight e2, repositioning to knight f4, h3. Now this h3 move, the point of it is in some endgame lines where pieces are traded off, the pawn will restrict the king from moving up to g2, and it can also promote. Rook c3, going after the pawn, and just rook h4. So the point of rook h4 is if rook h3, then rook g4, and you're winning the game. And if bishop h3, then queen g5 could lead to a devastating attack. So rook g3, protecting the bishop, and queen c7. Rook e1, king f8. Alireza doesn't need a castle, because first of all he can't, because the two rooks are out of the corners, and his king will be pretty safe on f8. So queen d3, trying to activate the queen. Now e5, breaking the center. Queen a3 check. Now this queen a3 check is asking Alireza, do you want to go to g8, e8, or do you want to trade queens with queen d6? And if you go to g8, then it looks unpleasant because the rook and king are in the same diagonal. If you go to f8, you're just undoing a move that you just did. So Alireza offers a trade with queen d6. A trade occurs, and Pentala wins back his pawn. Wins an extra pawn. But Alireza wins it back with ex d4, even though it's a doubled pawn. Knight c1, trying to reposition to either b3 or d3. Now rook d6, going after the h file. Bishop g2, and Alireza wins his pawn back. Knight d3, and rook h5. f4, rook c6, and bishop f3. Rook h to h6, rook g2, rook h to g6, pinning the rook. f5. Now this f5 move could prove to be a weakness in the future, but Alireza just goes back. Rook h6. Knight f4 now. Now this knight f4 is a huge inaccuracy. The best move to play in this position was simply like rook h2 or rook e2, rook d2. For white, you can't really play for any advantage. You're just trying to hold on to a draw. But this knight h4, even though it looks normal, leads to the astonishing d3. The point of this pawn sacrifice is to clear up the d4 square for your bishop. And we'll see what happens. So knight d3 and bishop d4. Now this bishop is extremely active. Knight f2 blocking, and rook c2, putting pressure on the knight. King f8, king f1, getting off the pin, and rook b2. Now Alireza will gobble up all the pawns. Rook e2, but just rook b1, rook e1, and rook h6, doubling up. Knight d3, and bishop c3, forcing a trade of rooks, because this rook doesn't really have anywhere to go. Rook b1, and king f2. Now, king e7, now Alireza wants to get his king into the game. Rook h2, and king f6, king e3, and king g5. Knight c5, rook b5 attacking the knight, rook h7 counterattacking, bishop g8, and rook c7 defending. King f5, getting more pawns, and knight b7, winning back a pawn, and attacking the bishop. So d4 check. In endgames, you really want to know this bishop and pawn structure where they protect each other. It can be very strong. King f2 and rook b2. Now from here, it's just a piece of cake for Alireza. Bishop e2, king f4. Knight d6, bishop d2, threatening bishop e3. King f1, rook b1, bishop d1, and not taking, but the powerful d3. And this is the nail in the coffin. In this position, Pentala Harikrishna resigned the game to Alireza Firouzja. And the reason he resigned, obviously he's down a passed pawn, he's about to lose his bishop, and something like king g3 could make a checkmate. So that's the end of the video, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, so whenever I make new content, you'll be notified. And thank you to everyone who's been giving me so much support. If you want to give a critique or any suggestions, then don't forget to comment it down below. And that's the end of the video.